Hello there, and welcome to Film Crack Crack. As you can see, we got some bad hombres on the show. As usual, you got Nick there, and a special guest curator. Who are you down there?
Hello, everyone. My name is GENO CUDDY. How are you doing tonight?
And obviously, we're going for a Western theme. Unfortunately, I watched the wrong films.
Oh no!
I watched some war films, and goddamn, wouldn't you know?
That poncho is great. It is a replica of Clint Eastwood's, but it's really hot, and today is not a day for wearing that for the whole show. But yeah, so we're here to talk about B Westerns, and I think I'd love actually Gino to maybe get us going here and give us a little bit of an introduction to how you first started watching B Westerns, because this is kind of new to me. My entry into the Western comes very much through the Italian Western, and maybe through later U.S. Westerns that were inspired or influenced by the Italian Western. So kind of that Clint Eastwoody, Lee Van Cleef kind of thing. So this is all new to me. So I'd love you to kind of give us a little bit of a potted history of the B Western, and then maybe give us a little bit of background about the actor who stars in both of the films we watched. So if you're good with that.
Well, yeah. Well, to your first question, how did I get interested in B Westerns? Well, back a few years ago, I think in around 2018, 2019 time period, I maybe a little later, I was trying to find new films to watch because I'm a big film fan. Anybody who's seen this program knows that. And so I was looking for new material, something fresh, something new that I haven't seen. So I was looking for recommendations of B Westerns because I was thinking about starting to get into them. I mean, I've always worn the cowboy hat on my television program, Gino in the Evening. So I sort of wanted to get interested in the Western culture and everything. And part of that being the B Western films that were produced during the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s, and some into the 1950s. And so I asked around for recommendations, and my friend James L. Nybar, who's an author, who's authored over, I think, 30 plus books on film history, including one that's actually going to be coming out soon on John Wayne films, in which I am actually referenced in.
Awesome.
He recommended to me some of the Buster Crabbe PRC Westerns that were produced during the 1940s, wherein Buster Crabbe plays Billy the Kid. And the first film, I remember this clear as day, the first B Western that I ever saw was the film Fuzzy Settles Down, which focused around the character of Fuzzy Q. Jones, played by legendary silent film comedian and Western sidekick Al St. John. And so that's how I got interested in B Westerns. Now, to your question, also of the history of them, well, Westerns during that time period were very popular. I mean, these people need to remember that this was an era before the superhero film really took off. And I mean, there were some superhero films, during these time periods, but predominantly the main form of entertainment on Saturday mornings in the theater was the B Western. I mean, these are films that kids would, bug their parents. Hey, can I go see the latest Roy Rogers movie? Can I go see the latest Gene Autry movie? And they would essentially pluck down probably about 15 cents back then, maybe a little more, a little less, to see a B Western, maybe a horror movie of some kind, a short subject, a cartoon, and and sometimes these would even be B features for the adults as well. They would play as the second feature in a double feature night at the movies. And more often than not, these films were produced by bottom of the barrel, by Poverty Row Studios, some better than others. And one of the best of the Poverty Row Studios. And for those of you who don't know what Poverty Row is, let me discuss that a little bit here as well. Poverty Row was essentially a strip of movie studios on Gower Street in Hollywood. And the reason why they're called Poverty Row is because they were lower budgeted film studios, meaning they would churn out films that were made with lower budgets and maybe not so well-known actors, and or in some cases actors who are on their way down the totem pole. And and because of the fact that so many westerns were churned out by these studios, they also coined the term Gower Gulch, which is what it also became known as. And there were so many westerns churned out by so many different studios. I mean, there were so many studios churning out these westerns that it's almost hard to compile a complete list of them.
It is a bit of a like I think, because me and Gino did do an episode on what's his name? You remind me, Gino, the so-called worst director of all, Western director of all time, Robert J. something.
Robert J. Horner.
Yeah, there we go. So we have spoken a little bit about this before, and I think we may. It's such a, because there is so much content. It is a bit. You get choice paralysis. I think you're not quite sure where to begin. Plus,
to enter,
we'll get to this a little bit, I think, when we get to the films in question. There's also they're kind of a little bit of a hard sell to a modern audience. You have to climatize to them a little bit, I think. You know, otherwise you can't really tell the difference between one or the other. Often you kind of have to get you have to get the taste for them, I think,
right,
to appreciate them properly.
So, because I don't have as clear knowledge even of the A westerns, right, of this era. So I'm trying to get my head around this idea. So things like your John Fords, like Stagecoach and stuff like that, they would have been like big budget A westerns, right? And okay, right.
The way I understand it is quite interesting, because it's difficult for us to think about this now because that stuff is vintage to us. But I think, for instance, Stagecoach is an interesting example. I think when Stagecoach came out at the time, people were like, oh, finally, at last, we haven't had like a great big proper Western like for a while, because there was a very early Western boom, like in the silence and the 20s.
Right.
There was Westerns that were very, very popular for adult audiences. And then, like Gino said, they kind of went into kiddie matinee territory, was where they lived through most of the 30s and 40s until they kind of came back really big in the mainstream in I would say probably the 50s. Of course, you had your John Fords and your standouts in the 40s as well. But I think like a serious diet of like Westerns being churned out all the time that weren't aimed at children, that's probably the 50s, right? And that's like the big resurgence. But yeah, this time period we're talking about, another reason they're overlooked, I think, is because critics just didn't review them, right? Critics didn't go to child matinees. They would have got sweets chucked at the back of their head, you know. But yeah, some of them did play, like Gino said, on when they were looking for the second on a bill. But largely they were, I think they had an audience of children who didn't write reviews, right? So
okay,
yeah.
So then the actor that we're talking about today is Sunset Carson. So how does Sunset Carson enter into, because it's Republic Films, right? Did they make both the films we watched? I definitely noticed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe we could even just speak, because when I think of Republic Films, I tend to think of their science fiction-y kind of stuff first. So yeah, this is kind of new to me to see them doing the Western stuff. But yeah,
I think
how does
a vintage film enthusiast, Republic is considered the foremost serial.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Did they do the Dick Tracy serials as well? I think maybe, or they did a whole load of great serials. Anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, Gino, yeah, how does Sunset Carson enter into this whole world of?
Well, Sunset Carson, very interesting story on him. Sunset was born, there are various accounts as to what his name was. Most sources you'll see say that he was born Winifred Maurice Harrison. But then there are other sources that state that he was just born Michael Harrison. And he was a major rodeo star in the 1930s, and he soon caught the glimpse of Hollywood because he was a startlingly tall individual. I think it was about, and people could correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe he was about 6'6".
Wow.
Very, very tall drink of water, and
quite built too. He's not that kind of lanky thin. Like he's a big dude.
Right.
And quite good looking.
Yeah.
Right. And he, one of his, I believe his first film appearance was in the all-star World War II vehicle, Stage Door Canteen. And then he did another film in 1944 for Michael Curtiz, I believe, called Janie. But it was really when he signed with Republic Pictures where he got his biggest break in the industry, when Herbert Yates spotted him and decided to sign him up and gave him the name of Sunset Carson. And they weren't sure at first if he would be a great screen presence. So for the first, I would say, 4 or so pictures, they paired him up with a comedian and musician named Smiley Burnett, who was most known for being the sidekick of Gene Autry. And he did some films with Roy Rogers as well before Gabby Hayes stepped in. And but then after the 4 pictures, audiences responded so well to Sunset that they wound up giving him his own series. And I believe his first 2 films as a solo star are the films that we're going to be reviewing tonight, which are Santa Fe SADDLEMATES and Sheriff of Cimarron, which are actually considered to be 2 of his best Westerns he made it while during his tenure at Republic. And he is most remembered for, making some of the most action-filled, slam-bang, action-laden films at Republic. Like, even to this day, when you mention the name of Sunset Carson, people still revere him as the action star of the 1940s. His films are just loaded with action, action, action. And that's what Herbert Yates wanted. And
so he has the accent too, which for me was interesting because like sometimes the bit part players, they may sound more California or more, which I recognize that the Wild West was much bigger than just the Deep South, but it is quite nice that he has the Texan, the legitimate Texan accent. Because every now and again you'll hear like in some Western show people that sound like they're straight out of like New York, and you're like, you sound like you should be in a Humphrey Bogart like gangster film. Not in the West.
They probably just crossed the lot, and they were in one.
Yes.
Yeah. Just before lunch, changed costumes and wandered onto, got on a bus that took them out to the Corrigan Ranch or, Bronson Canyon or something. And because it was a small community in those days. That's why whenever you look at films of this era, everyone has the longest filmographies, right? Everyone's in about at least 200-300 films, right?
Right. But he really sounds the part. Like he's, Sunset sounds like a proper cowboy in my mind as an Irish guy.
So the action though, because one of these at least is, both of them I suppose. One's according to the IMDb, one of them was uncredited, co-directed by Yucky McConnett, and the other one is a Yucky McConnett. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but obviously a legend, right? Yucky McConnett.
Absolutely.
How much of Sunset Carson, how much of his own stunts is he doing? Do you know?
I think he did a fair amount of his own stunts, and of course, Yakima Canutt, pioneered, the fighting choreography and the horse choreography that you often see in these films. I mean, it's amazing when you watch, especially these Republic films with Sunset Carson, just how effortlessly he jumps on and off of a horse, and he rides like the wind, and and also the fist fights and everything. I mean, Yakima Canutt, is an underrated name in the realm of action picture.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's interesting. He does. I assume it's him. I think it is him. he does more or less the same stunt in both of these films, or a slight variation on it, and it's still astonishing. It's the kind of thing that were Jackie Chan to do something similar, 40 years later or something, people would have written a lot about it, right? But for whatever reason, people weren't paying attention. But yeah, that's proper death defying.
Oh yeah,
I was guys are doing.
I was thoroughly impressed by that aspect for sure. I would say I watched them possibly out of release order. I think possibly is Sheriff the first one, and then Santa Fe SADDLEMATES the second one in terms of when they were released.
I believe so. So.
Because I watched Santa Fe SADDLEMATES first, and the first 10 minutes of that, I was like, "Holy shit! What? like that! Just bang, bang, bang! The whole part where he goes in and basically, and we find out a little bit later on that he's been tested, right? But you don't know that when you watch the first 10 minutes the first time. It's just a bunch of like near to well dudes throw themselves violently at him or whip things across the room, throw chairs at him, like roll downstairs, punching on him. And I was like, this is so good that in fact the rest of the movie can't quite keep up. I mean, how could you, right? Keep up that incredible level of intensity of those first 10 minutes. But I was completely sold.
It's surprisingly people don't think people were making meta films in those days, but it's very, because he gets into one fist fight and then another, and he even says, one of his lines is, "This is getting monotonous." Like it's kind of reflecting on itself. It's quite clever. It was, for me as well, that was by far one of the,
and they weren't stagey fights. They were scrappy looking, like arms akimbo, just like, that's what I was just like, oh my god, this is great. Like, this is much more convincing, fisticuffs than I've seen in films made much later on. So yeah, I was so stoked. I'd almost like to see a smash cut of just the best Sunset Carson gets in fist fights, just like an hour of that, and I would just sit back and have a beer and I'd be completely satisfied. But do we want to do? Are we going to kick off? We've got a couple of minutes. Do we want to start with the first? What order do we want to do the movies in? Do we want to do Sheriff first or Santa Fe first?
I'm unsure of the chronology. What got released first? Do you know? Any idea? I mean, it's almost a moot point. They probably came out within.
Well, yes, I think so. But I think Sheriff is the first one, and I think Santa Fe is the second.
Okay, should we go with Sheriff then? I guess.
Sure.
And I also, I don't know if this is going to be kept in the recording, but I also do have some collectibles just off the screen here that I could show off as well.
Yeah, please do.
If you want during the course of the program.
Yeah. That I want to see them. Maybe after we get kicked off here, so you don't get kicked off in the middle of showing something off. So yes, Sheriff of Cimarron, 45, Black and White Republic. Both of these films are very trim, 53 minutes. Right.
Another thing I love that these films there's no fat. They're so lean. It's so nice to see a movie that's not being extended like longer than it needs to be. And they're just they clip along the great.
I don't really need Zack Snyder's Sheriff of Cimarron, which is like 4 hours long or something.
No, thank you.
No thanks. Yeah, it's good. So this
one is the one where Sunset has the world's shittiest brother. Right? His brother is a real piece of crap in this film. Sorry, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. But yes, his brother is not a nice guy.
So this is like a lawless town, right? There's like a opening scroll all about Western expansion and how you would. And so in this particular town of Cimarron, it's a gold mining town, right? And it's basically fallen into lawlessness. And they're having
a lot of trouble getting the gold out of town.
Yes, because it keeps getting hijacked. Because there's and into this, comes Sunset Carson, who himself has a bit of a backstory, which is slowly revealed. And yeah, he just seems to be he proves himself to be the man for almost like the reluctant hero. They're like, well, please stay and be our sheriff because everyone else is either corrupted or useless, and
they're not 6'6" and built like a brick
and
house.
handsome, and we all fancy you, Sunset Carson. So please be our sheriff, basically.
But he's just come off of 3 years in prison, right? So that's that's another kind of So he has a bit of an edge.
But of course, he was
for a crime he didn't commit. But still, he's still pretty edgy about it, and for good reason. Like when later on the same thing starts to happen again, he quite rightfully gets like, I'm not doing that again.
What I quite like about Sunset Carson in both his films, I'm wondering if he continued this persona through his, because I think this is the only 2 Sunset Carson films I've seen. What I quite like about them, even though he is very much the white hat hero, he's a little mischievous. Like, he likes
a bit cocky.
He likes making women fall off chairs when they're hanging things so he can catch them. And he's not like full on, like you said, he does have this, he's not in a rush to prove that he's the good guy. Like, he's pretty chill. He's not in a hurry to please. He's not overly eager, right? He'll wait for other people to come round and notice that actually I see what he's up to now. Oh, clever old Sunset. So I quite like that about him, that he is a goody two shoes, but he's not too much of a goody two shoes. I have problems with heroes. I always like my heroes to have a even if it's just a little bit, just a little edge to them, a little bit. Makes them more relatable, because otherwise he's just a 6.5 foot Aryan Superman, which I can't really necessarily relate to that much. Right, I've forgotten why we were talking. So doing the plot summary. So of the 2, I think this was probably the one I enjoyed a little bit less overall. I would say too. When we get to just the propulsive nature of Santa Fe SADDLEMATES just totally took me aback. And by watching that one first, it kind of set me up to be like, oh my God, are they all going to be this crazy, this much intensity? And it had lots of great action, but it couldn't quite match the fever pitch of Santa Fe. But he had so who's the fellow who plays the sidekick in both of these? Because it is, I'm not wrong, right? It's the same actor, right?
Olin Howland, yes.
Okay. And so can you tell us a little bit what's his backstory as an actor?
I actually don't know too much about Olin Howland. I would have to do a little bit more research on him, but he was a great actor in these. I preferred him in the second feature, Santa Fe SADDLEMATES.
Right. Aloysius, whatever his name was.
Right.
Yeah. Well, he's closer to I mean, it's not as if I found him rip-roaringly funny or anything, but he's closer to the comic relief sidekick character, and is slightly doesn't fit neatly into that category here. Although he does have a fantastic character name of Pinky Snyder. Which I'm thinking of maybe stealing as my own AKA one day. So it is a great name. So my question to you, I suppose, so we'll get into this a little bit more. We'll get Geno to plug, because he's been writing about these films as well, and most entertainingly. But so obviously, you watch quite a bit of this stuff, and like I said, sometimes it's a bit of a hard sell if you don't have the taste for it. And so I watch both these films back to back. I watched Santa Fe SADDLEMATES first, and then so that's another thing I think, as someone who maybe doesn't have the stamina, I think a slight bit of fatigue set in the second feature, which might have been unfair to it because I was watching 2 in a row. But for instance, as someone who has a bit more of a taste and a context for this stuff, are you able to watch, let's say, 2, 3, 4 of these on the trot, or even for you, do they start to slightly blend together and become indistinguishable?
I could certainly watch them back to back. I mean, the duration of them isn't very long. I mean, 58 minutes in total for these things usually, and I find them heavily enjoyable. That's why I actually prefer the B westerns to the more glossy A product, because they're just full of action and charismatic leads most of the time. I mean, there are some really bottom of the barrel Western films that I've seen where the leads basically are about as entertaining as watching paint dry, which is something you've tested before.
No, that sounds exciting to me.
But Sunset is certainly one of the higher caliber B Western stars, in my opinion. I think he had a lot of charisma and was a great actor, pretty much, and so he carries a lot of these films. And another performer that we need to discuss is the beautiful Linda Sterling, who is his female lead in both of these films.
Yeah.
Yes, she sings La Cucaracha in one of them as well. I think the other one, right? Santa Fe SADDLEMATES.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So Linda Sterling, let me get into a bit of biographical information on her. She is pretty much remembered as Queen of the Serials, because she was in a lot of film serials back in the day. She's probably best remembered for two serials in particular. One of which is playing the Panther Woman in or the Tiger Woman. I believe it's the Panther Woman in a, I believe, 13-chapter serial. But most interestingly, she played, I think, and she's the only woman I know who's done this. She's the only woman to ever play Zorro on film without ever calling her Zorro. She was in a serial called Zorro's Black Whip, where she plays the title character, and she's quite violent and everything in that. And I actually have just off screen here, some collectibles of that I've collected at Sunset Carson, because I'm a big fan of his. And I actually do have in this scrapbook that I've made a still from one of the later films with Linda Sterling and Sunset. This is an original lobby card signed by Sunset and Linda Sterling.
Awesome.
From the film Rio Grande Raiders. And yeah, she was a marvelous starlet, beautiful to look at. She did some cheesecake photos, of course. And actually, interestingly enough, her latter career, when she left acting, she actually became a college professor. And she became a professor of English and drama at the Glendale College in California. But she would still make the occasional appearance at at film conventions, and she actually did make an appearance on a television program that Sunset Carson was going to host called Sunset Carson's Hollywood Nostalgia Theater, a program that sadly never got completed because he died during the production of it.
She's also in the serial The Crimson Ghost.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I forgot about that one. Yes.
Okay. Where the Misfits stole their logo, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. Yeah, and so this first one is also the one with the local kids who keep playing pranks on the
those little fuckers. I didn't like them.
Yeah, they're kind of jerks, I have to say.
Yeah.
They seem to get a lot of mileage out of giving him a hard time.
I think it would have been a great if they'd have gone the dark, if they'd have gone the great silence ending on this one. I think Sunset Carson should have just turned around and shot all the kids at the very end of the and then actually in a kiddie matinee, just turned around and turned the pistol at the screen, kind of like a warning.
Yeah. Buckle up and fly straight, kids.
Stop chucking those M&Ms at the screen, kids.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because in the earlier Sunset Carson films that he made with Smiley Burnett, there are actually some moments in those films where Smiley breaks the fourth wall. Like, I remember, I think it's in actually the first film that they did called Call of the Rockies, where Sunset is billed as Sunny Sunset Carson. And there's a sequence towards the end of the film where there's an outlaw chasing Sunset or Smiley, and Smiley falls off his horse. He takes a look right straight into the camera and says, "Kids, I'm going to need your help to shoot the bandit off the horse. If you'll just make a trigger finger and just go bang, bang, bang."
Wow. Audience participation.
Yeah. So that was an interesting way to integrate the audiences right into the story.
Mm-hmm. But the other thing that just occurred to me is, I think another reason, which is maybe makes it difficult and cloudy territory for people to keep a track of, I think it's the nature of the titles of these films as well. Like, they're so interchangeable, right? Like you just said, Call of the Rockies. It's like, it's probably very different. Which one was Call of the Rockies and which one was,
right,
and which one was Buckaroo's Ride Again, or they're very generic titles, which are very difficult to kind of separate in your mind. I feel. But yeah, so yeah, the one that I think we both see, the three of us seem to have liked the most, was Santa Fe SADDLEMATES, right? Which had this kind of interesting plot about diamond smuggling on a very large ranch that covered both sides of the border. And
Mexican border, yeah. And they're hiding them in these pommels on the top of the saddles.
And also, slightly more worryingly, keeping their diamond stash like in a fireplace under some ashes. I'm sure they could have found a better place than that. That was struck me as slightly unwise. Burn your fingers every time you try and get your diamonds out. But
yes, but yeah, it has the, I think, the one of the greatest openings I've ever seen of any Western. Just that whole part where the test, the trial by fire that Sunset has to go through, just entering room after room and dudes just launching themselves across the room and beating the tar out of him. And yeah, I was just totally smitten with that.
And Linda Sterling has a more kind of interesting character in this as well, because she's turns out to be like a undercover journalist herself.
Yes, and you're kind of not sure from what I thought at the very beginning that maybe she was in with the crooks. Like there was something about, it was like she was a bit more hard to read at the start as to what was going on with her.
The other one that jumped out at me as well in this one, because I've always quite liked him, is Ken Duncan as well, as Ken Duncan turns up as the real Brazos Kane, right? Like, he's not the main heavy in this one.
Oh, yeah. I don't know who that actor is though. So who is this?
Ken Duncan, you might know him because later on he ended up being an Ed Wood.
Okay.
And there's some great, you've read the book, right?
I have, yeah.
So there's a great anecdote about him, because basically, he was his nickname was Ken Horsecock Duncan, and there's some great anecdotes in that book. Basically, he was a very horny man,
a well-endowed ex-cowboy.
Basically couldn't get enough, and there's some quite amusing anecdotes about him. Like, apparently he was quite the terror. Like, he often played the villain in B westerns, and apparently he was pretty much took that on-screen image with him off-screen. And
I'm gonna get vaporized by the sun here, as you can see in a moment, so I'm gonna go close the blinds. So you guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in just a sec.
So so as we alluded to, Geno writes about these films in even greater detail. Where do you do that, and where can people read it?
Thank you, Clive, for the plug. I write my reviews for a website called Cinema Craze. So if you just go to cinema-craze.com and you could find them under the name Western Wednesdays, because that's the name of my column. And I've been writing for about a few months now, and it's an enjoyable experience for me. And I want to give a big tip of the hat to my friend Phil Hall, who hosts the online movie show and Nutmeg Chatter, for convincing editor Felix Vasquez Jr. to allow me on the site to publish my reviews on there. And because I've been having a great time with it, and it's gotten me a lot of exposure, and it's gotten these films a lot of exposure as well, which is something that I'm wanting to do. I mean, again, I can't stress enough, these guys were the original screen superheroes of their day. Before Superman and Batman and all these other guys came to the forefront. You know, Sunset Carson, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, Ken Maynard, Hoot Gibson, Tom Mix, William S. Hart, even back in way back in the silent days, they were the original superheroes of their time. And so I think that sadly these guys have gotten forgotten by the grand master plan here. And I do think that they deserve their recognition still to this day, and because their films are still enjoyable. I mean, I'm coming at this as a 28-year-old young man, and I heavily enjoy these films, and I think that there's still something to enjoy about them. And obviously, you both feel the same. At least I know Nick does, because he heartily enjoyed the film Santa Fe SADDLEMATES. Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. If there's more like that, send them my way, Gino.
Yeah, I did.
And I think that's that balls to the wall action, and again, the reality of the, like, I mean, you brought him up before, but like Jackie Chan is not a bad connection to make, right? Like, there's something so real about watching people really risk themselves, like for the screen.
Our entertainment, yes.
You know, and you know, ever since the invention of the like CGI green screen, so much of that has just been lost for me as a viewer. And I know I'm old man complaining again about this, but like going back and seeing this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, no, that's two men rolling down the stairs. Like, just that's what that is, and somebody's got a camera on them, and it's just, yeah, it's really exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the reasons Nick might be coming across as slightly more enthusiastic is because, like you said, this is slightly unfamiliar territory, and I remember about a decade or so ago, I did go through a bit of a B-Western phase, and I did watch quite a few of them, and so it's not exactly the bloom is off the rose, but they're not. I'm already half expecting a certain amount of amazing stunt work and stuff, which you probably would.
Yeah, no, not at all. I had no idea that I was in for in that way. Yeah.
So it's not that I don't appreciate them. It's just the shock value has gone a little bit, because I remember when I first got into them, having exactly that same reaction of, wow, look, wow, look at fucking hell, really? In 30s, 40s, it's just, like I said, it's a little bit of a forgotten area of cinema, and I don't want to be totally disingenuous about it. I'm not as enthusiastic as Gino is, for example, and I can see why they are. Well, actually, it'd be interesting to see what Nick thinks about this, because for me, I can see why it's a hard. I mean, I'm not quite sure how or who I would try and aim these films at, because I don't know, it just seems like they seem so from another time and place, and a little bit, I mean, even the best of them, I think even Gino would agree, even the very best of them are often two-dimensional in terms of their plots and characterizations and stuff like that, right? They don't go too deep, which might be the appeal for people.
Yeah, it's part of the charm.
Well, yeah. So, I mean,
I look at the B-Westerns. Let me just sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
Let me just state here my viewpoint on the classic B-Westerns of the 30s and 40s. I view them as cinematic comfort food. Much like how I view the Charlie Chan films, the Mr. Moto films, a lot of the B features of the day. These are B features. Let's just put that pin in there. and make sure that people are aware these are B movies. You know, it's like what Clive and I were talking about off camera here. We were talking about Crown International Pictures, which made a lot of B features. I mean, none of these films are ever going to stack up against, say, you know, like The Searchers. And like when you compare something like The Searchers with Santa Fe SADDLEMATES, of course, what's going to win out? The Searchers, of course. But for me personally, as far as fun factor, fun value, I more or less prefer the B Westerns because A, they're short, they're over in 58 minutes. B, they're loaded with action, and C, the stars are often quite charismatic, and D, a lot of them some of them could carry a tune quite well.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's something I wanted to thank you for reminding me. Actually, I have to say if I'm going to sit down with a B Western of this era, I have to admit I am slightly more partial to the yodelers and the singers. I don't know why that is. I do like my singing cowboys. It's just an extra. It's an extra layer that I like. So even if you're not quite getting on board with a story, there'll suddenly be, you know, quite a nice, relaxing
musical number.
Yeah, to your thing about it being kind of comfort food, I can sit back and I can enjoy them and yodeling, like it's just an extra thing. It's, you know, if nothing else is working, and actually not just the other thing I like, some of these westerns are more heavy on the music as well, right? So it's usually the singing western ones is not just the main star, like they'll be a scene or something early on when the hero walks into a bar when he arrives in town, and you know there'll be someone like Sons of the Pioneers or the Texas Tornadoes or someone like that is you know playing in a saloon, and that stuff's great because otherwise you wouldn't see. There's no existing footage of those people. I don't think, you know, I don't know, you know, if they were on the Grand Ole Opry or something like that, I think you'd probably just have audio recordings, but you can actually see them. I know they're not playing live, but still, it's a treat to see people like that, right? And and they're preserved. So that there definitely is stuff to enjoy in these films, but it does require a certain amount of excavation and kind of finding out what you like and what you don't like. And
it's funny though too, like, so you know, like I think about, like, you know, obviously, as you know, my entry point to the Western is predominantly was through the Leone films, right? And then after that, like all of various other the Sergio Corbucci's and, you know, Sergio Solimas and so on. But I recognize too, like, I don't know who I would show those to. I wouldn't show them to any of the students I teach because I don't think they would get them at all. I think they're probably, and maybe for other reasons, they're overlong. I think probably, for one thing, like a lot of them are clocking at like, you know, an hour and 45, 2 hours, right? And again, there's not the, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I mean, but the things that I love, like the intense, mannered kind of like operatic stuff, like the close-ups of the eyes, and then the, you know, cuts a long shot, and then, you know, like suspending a gun, like whatever you call it, like a draw over like 4 minutes of cinema, right? That's manna for me. That's like absolutely, that's my bread and butter. But I recognize that I don't think most people have the attention span or the interest to watch 3 sweaty dudes face off against each other for 5 minutes.
Are you talking about this podcast?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, exactly. I tried to close this thing. I still feel like I'm about to vaporize by the sun here. I'm going to go see if I can deal with this one more time before
Yeah, kind of. I have a question for Gino, actually. So Nick mentioned earlier like a supercut of fights and stuff like that. And I was thinking back, like in the 60s and stuff, you had a bunch of like those compilation films like Days of Thrills and Laughter and stuff like that, you know, took clips from mostly comedies, but a lot of the action sequences from Keystone Cops and stuff like that. Do you know of any similar comparable kind of entry point where someone is there like a doc or like a clip compilation show appreciation of the B Westerns that you know of? Because I've never come across one.
You know, That's a good question. I've actually never come across any sort of documentary on them or anything like that.
That seems a
the
shame.
Yeah, it is, and the closest that I think you would come to learning more about the B Westerns and having like clip shows showing you and stuff. I've actually uploaded some episodes on my channel, Geno's House of Rare Films.
Sorry, we should say, Geno, that's where we saw both of these films.
Oh yes, yes.
So if you are excited, to watch Sunset beat the living tar out of dudes in a very dramatic and exciting way, go to Geno's channel.
Yes, that's Geno's House of Rare Films, where not only have I uploaded the complete filmography of Sunset Carson, but I've also uploaded quite a bit of episodes of his television series, Six Gun Heroes, where he hosted a show discussing and showing a lot of the classic B Westerns. That was a production of PBS and South Carolina Educational Television back in the 1980s.
Oh,
and there are also clips of Sunset interviewing a lot of the old Western stars, including Linda Sterling, as a matter of fact, on a YouTube channel that was run by the late Jerry Whittington. I don't have the exact YouTube channel in front of me, and I apologize for that. But if you type in Sunset Carson Linda Sterling interview, you'll most likely come across that. And then if you click that link, you'll probably be forwarded to a bunch of the other interviews that Sunset did for his Hollywood Nostalgia Theater program that never got completed. And they're just fascinating interviews to listen to. And there actually is one that he did with Yakima Canutt, which is also a fascinating listen. So I'll make sure to. And here's where I'm going to plug your group, Clive. There's actually a Facebook group for this podcast, and that's the Magic Morning Wood Circle Jerk. And I will be posting some of those interview clips in that group for the audience.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm interested. I'm wondering. You said 80s, right? So I'm just wondering if did he get to Buster Crabbe before he passed? Did he interview him, or because he must have, because he did the Alien Dead, right, and not long before he died, and that's 79. So I'm wondering if he might have just missed out on interviewing.
I think he did, unfortunately.
Okay, because yeah, he's a man who kind of fascinates me because, like, yeah, that's the other string to his bow, right? He's Tarzan, he's Flash Gordon, but also, yeah, he was in. Am I imagining it, or was he one of the Three Musketeers, or wasn't he part of one of the groups who had a long series of westerns? Or I'm sure he was in one Three Musketeers like group for a few episodes, and then he was swapped out for someone else. I don't know if I'm misremembering that.
I think you might be. I certainly, in my research, I don't ever recall coming across anything like that. Okay. But he certainly appeared in a lot of westerns as Billy the Kid, and later Billy Carson, when they found out that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be glorifying a murderous serial killer.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's something maybe we could do together. Something I've always wanted to do is a bit of a cinematic history of how the Billy the Kid character has kind of changed over the years, and fascinatingly has become his own almost like cinematic alter ego that has nothing to do with the real person. And
figure, yeah,
it's all quite interesting. And you could do one on different I mean, I don't know much about things like people like Bat Masterson or something, but I'm sure if you compared the real to the real, as it were, that would make for fascinating. Anyway, that's all future riches to get into, because as always, I've thoroughly enjoyed having Geno on. So he has an open door invitation to come back anytime. And thank you for curating these films. Is there anything you want to say in closing? Either of it?
Yeah, just go and check out my reviews at cinema-craze.com/blog/category/Western Wednesdays. I think that's how you can find it. And I'm sure that Clive in the show notes will provide a link below, as well as in the Magic Morning Wood Circle Jerk. I usually post my reviews there, as well as on various Western themed Facebook pages across the site. So there's no shortage of ways that you can access my reviews. I would like to say thank you to Clive and thank you to Nick for having me on. It was a pleasure to come on and discuss the legacy of Sunset Carson, who is one of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite, cowboy Western hero. So much so that I've dedicated a whole scrapbook to him with autographs and such, because I do appreciate his work so much. And I have several autographs of his, as well as several photos. And
is that stuff difficult to come by?
I've acquired most of it on eBay, actually.
Okay.
And it is pricey, but it's well worth the endeavor. And I'm going to state this, and this is going to be a legal documentation record of me stating this. When I pass away, I want the scrapbook, this photo album that's underneath here, and this signed photo that I have framed of Sunset to go directly to his family. So cool. I want that to be documented right here in case there's ever any legal wranglings later on.
Yes, always. Yes, if we don't only talk films, we're also the top legal legal eagles of the podcasting world. So here's a quick question then, just before we do go. Sunset Carson, probably your favorite. Who'd be a close second?
Ken Maynard.
Interesting. Okay, there we go. A potential kind of clue as to what we might discuss in future. Yep. I don't think I know Mike Maynard very well. So
no, not at all.
Yeah, a double or triple bill for us. I think we're quite happy to talk Ken Maynard on here in the future, Gino.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Look forward to that.
Okay then. So this has been your Film Crack Crack with me, Clive Davis, with him down there. That's you, Nick. And special guest, curator,
Geno Cuddy.
Fantastic. That was very smoothly done.
Yes, that was awesome. But that's what they come to us for.
No one would expect any better from us, so it's fine.
No.
So,
awesome. Okay.
Until next time, then.
See everybody.
Cheerio.